Hello everyone, welcome to our Smiley Talks, the Big Education Action Plan event. I'm Ellen and I'm the editor of Smiley Movement. Before I hand over to our fabulous panel, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. Smiley Movement is a non-profit that aims to tackle the big issues in society by matching people and organisations who can help solve problems with others that need solutions. We want to make it as simple as possible for anybody, anywhere, to start creating change and have a positive impact. Last year, our inspired panel of educational charities, positive disruptors and academics discussed the importance of humanising education, making it more learner-centric and nurturing a sense of curiosity and fun in learning. Today, we'll be discussing how we can transform education and how we can seize this pivotal moment in time in order to create a better education system. If you have any questions for our panel, please make sure to leave a comment down below. And now I'll hand you over to Ray Snape, who we are delighted to announce as the first ever Smiley Talks Education Ambassador.
Thank you very much, Ellen, and I'm very excited to be an ambassador for Smiley Education Talks. It's a real honour, and it's also a real honour to introduce you to our fabulous panel this afternoon. Before I introduce them, I'm just going to say a little bit about myself for people who may already know me or might not know me. I'm the head teacher, National Leader of Education of Milton Road Primary School. I'm also one of the co-founders of CAMS EdFest, Cambridgeshire Festival of Education, which is an optimistic education festival looking to celebrate teachers and teaching and try to project a really optimistic view of what the world of education is about. Teachers need other teachers, our children need great teachers, and if we can work together and share some positivity, we can bring the best of people who are interested in being educators into the ecosystem. So this morning I am thrilled and delighted and excited to introduce you to Adrian Bethune. Adrian is an author, he is an educator, he is a real life primary teacher, he is also the proud father of two wonderful children, and I know him currently from the exciting work he is doing on Teach Happy. I'm also excited to introduce you to Flora Barton. Flora is a head teacher, a real live head teacher of Crowmarsh Gifford Church of England Primary School, and she's also the designer of the Burn Bright online conference, which I'm hoping we'll hear more about towards the end of today's event. And Peter Hyman, I'm really delighted to welcome to this conversation this morning. Peter is the co-director of Big Education and co-founder of School 21, and I'm particularly looking forward to hearing from him about the hashtag rethinking assessment. But before we get into a real discussion, I will come to you each in turn with a really simple question around: what are you working on? What are you interested in? What are the things that are inspiring you to be socially active in the landscape at the moment? So Adrian, if I can start with you, tell me a little bit about what you're doing and tell me about Teach Happy.
Cool, thanks Ray. So it probably helps to start how I got into kind of education in the first place. So I used to work in music publishing, had a well-paid job. It was fun, enjoyable, had lovely colleagues. And in about, I guess, 2008, things just kind of started to unravel for me personally. I bought my first kind of shared ownership flat, but it was right on the eve of the world financial crisis. And I started to suddenly feel anxious about having this mortgage and other things. And I had a big fallout with a friend, and that kind of knocked me as well. And basically these subtle feelings of anxiety kind of grew and turned into eventually like this acute anxiety. And because it affected my sleep, it affected everything that I was doing at the time. I literally completely burned out. And then I went into this kind of bout of depression. And the reason that massively threw me, I mean, it would throw anyone, but I'd always been quite a happy-go-lucky, optimistic kind of person. And I had no idea how to help myself kind of get better or feel better at the time. And I do remember reflecting, actually, in one of my kind of really low periods, of all, you know, I'd worked extremely hard at school and university, and I remember thinking to myself, I have all of these qualifications, all of this knowledge, and I literally don't know how to help myself get better. I have no idea what to do right now to get me out of this kind of funk that I was in. But luckily, you know, just having conversations with friends, someone signposted me to go in to see a counsellor, which literally, this was about 12 years ago, just wasn't on my radar. I didn't even know you could do that, or if that was an option. And being an analytical kind of person, I also just started to research causes of stress, anxiety, depression, and I just learned a whole load about physical and mental health that I just didn't know before. And I also discovered like that there was a science of well-being. So it wasn't just the causes of anxiety and depression. It was a whole field dedicated to the empirical study of what contributes to human well-being, human flourishing. And I just learned a whole load of stuff that on reflection, I wish I'd known at school. And as part of me kind of getting better, I volunteered. I signed up to a mentoring scheme with a charity in London called Chance UK. And I mentored for a year a boy, a 9-year-old boy in Hackney who was being taught in a pupil referral unit. So he was at risk of being kicked out of mainstream school for his behaviour. And I got to know this boy. I got to realise, you know, he was living in poverty, had a mother with mental health difficulties. His brother was involved in local gangs. And, you know, I was, really got to know this boy. And it just made me realise that his school at the time was not helping him manage his completely tumultuous life, really. And he was they just kind of wanted to get rid of him and for him to be someone else's problem. And anyway, as part of that mentoring and me getting a massive sense of meaning and purpose out of that journey, I retrained to be a primary school teacher in 2010. And then when I got in the classroom, you know, my intention was to help children like the boy I'd mentored. It was to help the ones on the fringes. It was to help children, you know, fit in, be a success, and ultimately learn how to be happier. And the reality didn't live up to kind of my expectations. I just couldn't believe how academic focused even primary school was, and it was all about kind of results and progress and next steps, and it all had to be at speed. You know, if someone was behind, they had to rapidly make progress and catch up, and it just increased, you know, the pressure and stress on me. I started to notice my own kind of mental health suffering, and I decided in my first year of teaching, where I was thinking, I'm not sure I can do this. You know, I thought I'd made a big mistake getting into teaching. I just thought, look, if I'm going to leave teaching at the end of this year, I'm going to do stuff differently now. And I'm going to focus on the things that I know are important. And I just started making small changes, kind of weaving elements of wellbeing into the curriculum, changing things just in my classroom. And then it kind of spread from there. Other teachers were asking about what I was doing in class. My head teacher noticed and said, can you run a staff training? And ever since that moment, I've just researched and put into practice what the evidence shows works in terms of improving student and teacher well-being. And so, you know, that's my path, and that's where I am. And 3 years ago, I set up Teach Happy, which essentially is just sharing resources, interviews, blogs about the science of well-being and how it can be applied in schools. And it's also about kind of me. I teach part-time now. I go into schools, I deliver training, I give talks like this, because I just want to spread this, you know, as far and wide as possible, so that people in education realize and understand and know how to weave well-being into everything at the heart of everything they do. Because not only does it improve children and teacher well-being, it actually improves kind of academic attainment as well, because we know from the research that generally speaking, happier children perform better, happier teachers teach better. And that's at the heart of my philosophy.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I know that we will find a way to direct people towards your awesome book as well, which is full of top tips about how to weave those healthy well-being elements into the primary classroom. Flora, you heard Adrian there talking about how he knew he had to work with staff as well as children. Flora, when you first became a head teacher 8 years, yes, 8 years ago, one of the first things that you did was to initiate an idea where twice a week your teachers were able to leave the school at 4:15. Why was this important to you, their well-being and these really practical steps?
I think, sort of as Adrian was saying, it is very much about the well-being of the teachers. The teachers are what make the magic happen in school. And it was, imperative to me that the well-being and workload was a focus for our school. I think, we know that teachers work long hours and the workload is crazy in schools, and we know that well-being has to be a central focus. So for me, coming into school, that I knew that was an issue that we needed to deal with directly. So we now ask 3 questions. We've done it since the beginning. We ask 3 questions of everything we do. So we ask what the purpose of what we're doing is, what impact what we're implementing or what we're thinking about implementing is going to have on the children. If it's not positive, we usually don't do it. And then also the third question is, what impact is it going to have on the workload of staff? And again, if it's not positive, we don't do it. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that well-being can't just be an add-on. It can't just be something that we tack on days and well-being events. It has to be absolutely the culture and the fabric of the school. It has to be a part of the whole ethos, or else it's not effective.
Wonderful. And can you tell me a little bit about what it was that inspired you to do the Burn Bright conference? Because I know that that's been hugely popular, and you've got another one planned for December.
Yeah, we do. We have one planned for December. More information about that will be tweeted out hopefully soon. I think for me, coming out of the pandemic, which we're not out of, but the lockdown and just this time we've been given, I think, is an opportunity. And I think we need to look at where we are, reflect on where we've come from, and really think about what we want for the future of education, what we want to focus on. And I think it's a chance to redefine what education looks like, what schools look like. And I think I've come out, I've always had the hashtag shine on. I believe passionately that we need to try and help children and adults, the adults we work with, help find their purpose. As people will know from my personal story, in my past, I've come through, an abusive relationship, a marriage. And throughout that, I've always had this purpose. And it's a purpose that's always got me through everything I have been through. And I've always had shine on as my mantra, just because it's about shining our lights and knowing that there are better days ahead, and just keep positive. And so it is about helping people find their purpose.
Thank you so much. I find following you on Twitter just so inspiring on an almost daily basis. You are one of the people. And I know that I'm not the only head teacher who thinks like this. There are lots of head teachers who really love what you're doing and see the optimistic way that you present yourself and share your stories.
Thank you very much.
Peter, if I can come to you, please. I've heard from Adrian and Flora about some sort of pivotal moments in why they're now doing and working in the way that they are. Was there a pivotal moment before you set up School 21, going back to Flora's point about rethinking what education should be about? Because School 21 is a school that is nationally and internationally renowned as a place that thinks quite differently about the purpose of education. Was there a moment for you where you thought about key elements within the design of the school?
Well, I've been very fortunate in seeing both ends of the telescope. So I was in politics for nearly 10 years, being a speechwriter and strategist at Number 10, and then left to become a teaching assistant in a really challenging school, and doing that almost overnight with no skills at all to be able to do the job. But I was sort of intoxicated and loved being in a school. And I think it was that idea of seeing both sides of it, of having a view from government about what schools might be like, but then really once I'd immersed myself in the school and worked my way up, I trained as a history teacher. I then became a deputy head in the school in Southall. and the ideas were forming then. And I suppose the one that carried through all of that experience was the idea that the education and the curriculum had to be broader, that we can't just focus on exams. We've got to develop the whole child. And it chimes in with what Adrian and Flora have been saying about well-being, both for staff and for teachers and for young people. It's got to be what we call developing the head, heart and hand. So head being academics, heart being well-being and personal growth, and hand being creativity and problem solving. And we needed schools to have them in some kind of balance, which all too often we think isn't the case. And so that's what really sort of made me think about setting up a school. And then with two other co-founders, Ed and Ollie, we thought about, well, what could a school, so we set up a 4 to 18 school, which is what School 21 is, to see that whole journey throughout those years, developing that balance of head, heart and hand. And if you like, the golden thread for us is what's called oracy. So we've done a huge amount of work, and we've set up a charity, Voice 21, which is working with hundreds of schools around the country, developing speaking skills, because whether it's the head, the heart or the hand, for each of them, it is about a child and a young person finding their voice. And for us, that is a moral purpose. Going back to what Flora was saying about finding your purpose, every young person, we need to help find out who they are, what's their identity, how do they want to lead their lives, how do they have agency over their life, and being able to speak and articulate those ideas is really profound. And what we found is it helps both with academic learning to be able to articulate yourself and to develop oracy, but it also helps with your well-being. It's intimately connected with this idea that you've found your voice. And so that's been one of the really important ingredients at School 21. And during COVID, we have really found that a lot of these ideas, as the others are saying, have come alive, because whilst it's been a moment of high stress at many points and real difficulties for many of the families that we serve, there's also been a sense that now is the time to rethink some of those things that we haven't had time or space or inclination to do in the past. And so it's opened up a huge amount of creativity, which I know we're going to come on to in the rest of this discussion.
So if I can I want to come back to you in a few minutes, Peter, to talk about what you've mentioned there about rethinking things. But just to bring the conversation back round to Adrian, these words that Peter's talked about, voice, choice, agency, identity, we think about this a lot from the children's point of view. How important is that from a teacher's point of view? You are a teacher as well, your own ability to have an influence over the school, how important is that? Your own creativity within the school, how important do you think that is for retention? Because I know you also work very closely with Dr. Emma Kell. Yeah,
so Emma and I earlier this week published a book together called Teacher Wellbeing and Self-Care. And it's great hearing Flora and Peter speak, because the first chapter is all about purpose and reminding ourselves why we chose to get into the classroom in the first place. And the reason, like Flora said, we started with that is, I think quite often in education, because it can be such a busy, noisy profession, you can find yourself a few years down the line on a path you never even expected or wanted to be on. It might be that you're, deputy head, and actually you've lost sight of the fact that you got into teaching to just be a brilliant English teacher, and suddenly you're out of the classroom and managing a school, and you've ended up somewhere you didn't want to be. So reminding yourself constantly, why am I here? What is my purpose? And when I remind myself of that, it takes me back to the boy I mentored, because that relationship with just that one child, and just thinking, actually, if I can be in the classroom, if I can help other teachers, help those children that are struggling, not just academically, but struggling to stay inside our mainstream education system, then that's an acute positive sense of purpose for me. The last chapter in the book is about agency, because that is about having a sense that you can control the important things in your life, and then actually kind of enact some change. And what we say in the book, Emma and I, is actually the small things matter. Like sometimes we can feel a bit powerless when we think about everything that we might want to change about the entire education system. But actually, there's a phrase we like to use. It comes from a TomTom advert, which is, you're not stuck in traffic, you are traffic. And it's the same about, you know, we can bemoan the education system, but actually teachers make up that system. Like, we are part of the system, which means if we change, if we start to change the things that we do, then the system slowly but surely starts to change and shift as well. So yeah, I would echo things that Flora and Pete have said, that agency, finding your voice, having a core sense of moral purpose as well, making the right choices, which again, in a system that might be pushing you down a certain path, it takes real kind of moral integrity and courage to say, no, like Flora is saying, I'm not doing that. It's not benefiting my students. It's not benefiting my staff or the community. We're not going to do it. But that takes you knowing yourself really well and knowing what's important. And I do think it takes courage, because you're going against the grain.
I remember seeing some while ago the tweet that you put out, which says, we are the traffic. We are the system. And that was a lot of what was one of the drivers with setting up the CAMZ Fest, is that with co-founding that with other great people such as Helena Marsh, who was also one of the founders of Women Ed, is that teachers don't always, in my view, do themselves justice, because they can tend to close in and be quite negative. And actually we need to be quite ebullient and quite positive, because there are things to celebrate within the education system. Flora, coming back to this thing about purpose and COVID giving us time to rethink about the education system, your wonderful online conference, you brought in various speakers. What was it about the type of people that you were drawing in to be part of the Burn Bright conference that you saw a synergy with for what you were thinking about in this time post-lockdown?
Well, Adrian spoke. He was there. But I did really a call out for people to come and speak. And the main thing was just about getting people to be there and to speak and to get people's voices heard. And that was all it was about. It was really trying to get the collective voice, to kind of get a groundswell of, again, it's just a collaborative effort, and to start a debate and possibly a movement, to get people to start debating about what it is that we want to change in education. And I think what you said is really important about celebrating the really good things that we are doing, because there's schools all over, all over that are doing amazing things. And that's what we need to celebrate. And we need to be collaborating more as schools. I keep talking about this competition that exists between schools because of the way league tables are set up and Ofsted and data. And we need to break down this competition and work together, because that is what we're in it for, is for the improvement of education for every child everywhere, not just the children in our schools. And so we need to work together. More voices and more power.
And I was reflecting last night that what we need to see is, or what children need to see, is adults modeling collaboration. Because exactly as you have said, Flora, there are elements of bright activity, bright spots all over the education landscape. But there's something about just shining a light on what's going on already in the ecosystem so that we can start to join the dots. And I really think that events like this, events like your event that you've done, the great work of Big Education, which we'll get to in a minute, is really about surfacing all the positivity that's really happening, so that we can reach the tipping point of 16% of educators actually being able to see each other and know what they think and can share ideas. And if educators start to do that, we start to show what's possible to the children, to show collaboration and perhaps this way of empathizing and sharing and being more creative. So, Peter, I want to come to you now, because obviously I'd like to hear a little bit more about what happened from your perspective, seeing the national policy around GCSEs, and then out of that, the conversation that started to emerge using this hashtag rethinking assessment. Because actually, from what I've seen and from the Guardian article I've read, you and other colleagues are achieving great things. So I'd really like to hear a bit more about rethinking assessment.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, echoing what we've been talking about up till now, look, 80% of it, I think, has to be bottom up. I think all those bright spots are out there, but 20% of it has to be influencing, if you like, and changing the barriers that are holding back this creativity. And I think for us, one of the biggest barriers of really having that more expansive whole child education is the way the assessment system works. And obviously we had an impetus for that change this summer with the exam shambles, particularly at GCSE and A level. But that was really, if you like, the final straw in an ongoing belief. I mean, there was a report from ASCL, one of the head teacher unions last year, called The Forgotten Third, which is saying, asking the question, why is it that after 12 years of education, a third of young people have to fail? This isn't like a choice because of the bell curve, because it's not criterion referenced, as it was when it first came in. GCSEs now mean that however well you've done, a third of young people have to be labelled as failures. Now that is wrong to us and to thousands of people. They think that's just not right. Another point about the assessment system is it only measures a narrow version of the academic. In our language, the head. It doesn't measure the heart and the hand or give any recognition or credit for that as young people move through the system. There was similarly a lot of critique of the Year 6 SATs in primary schools for similar reasons, that it's too narrow, it skews what primary schools are about. Now, look, probably all of us here and all of those people watching are in favour of everyone being excellent at literacy and numeracy, and we would add oracy to that. And of course, you want that about the foundation. You want that to be the foundation of education. But we've got to recognise that broader set of knowledge, skills and attributes that we want every young person to come up with. So we've got together state schools, independent schools, academics, businesses, universities. We set up this website, rethinkingassessment.com, and it's got a twin purpose. The first purpose is to make space for change. And on that website, you'll see some really interesting blogs, lots of different perspectives about why we need change. And the other thing is we are all, if you like, we've got skin in the game. Everyone around that table, the movement we're creating, we've already had hundreds of people sign up, all want to make tangible change. They don't want to talk about this anymore. We all want to find workable solutions, some of them small, some of them system-wide, that mean we can start to change the assessment system. So people are looking at portfolios to show the breadth of a young person's work. They're looking at the employers who are investing lots of money in what they call strengths-based assessments. So that shows, again, the full depth of what they're looking for in an employee, and they're investing millions of pounds to make that work. Well, why can't we translate that back into our schools? So we're looking at all the horizon scanning around the world and trying to see what are the places that are doing it, and incidentally not just in education but beyond education, what are the ways of recognizing the full range of talents of a person, and then how do we bring that into our system? So as you say, it started really well. There's a huge engagement with it from a huge vast range of people, and I think it's really it's going places because I think people can see that its time has come.
I think it's really great to hear that the work that you're doing has moved beyond the case and the argument, because I suspect that there are many people that have seen the flaws within the education system, and I'm sure some of us are familiar with the bell curve, and Michael Gove saying that this was a necessary side of the education system, and this 30% of children set up to fail. And what I'm really excited to hear about is this horizon scanning for other models. And I had the great fortune to hear David Price talk about examples from schools across the world that are approaching the curriculum differently, so that there are opportunities for children to do project-based learning, so that it brings in those 21st century skills of creativity and collaboration and so on. Have you heard so far from government and ministers? Are you getting traction from the 20% that you describe? Because we know in terms of, I'm 100% with you. I think there has to be it's a grass level movement, but equally we do need that 20%. Any other people coming on board who are in a position to shape policy?
As you've just suggested, look, everything is linked in this argument. You know, the curriculum is obviously the starting point, and assessment flows from curriculum. So amongst our group, we have lively discussions about this, because you can't just sort of pluck a new assessment system out of the air. It's got to link to, as this discussion has already discussed, what's the purpose of education? If you want to educate the whole child, if you want head, heart and hand in balance, then you can't just assess the head in a very narrow way. So the starting point is curriculum. It's good to see that Ofsted, although I've got, you know, many criticisms of Ofsted, but it's edging towards a broader concept of curriculum, which again is pushing schools to think more broadly about what their offer is, which I think is a good thing. We've had 100, if we just talk about the politics of this, we had 100 Tory MPs the other day say they wanted assessment reform, and they put out a pamphlet on that. We've had interest from the other parties, Labour included as well. So there is quite broad support amongst them. And there's a growing movement of employers, of parents, of head teachers who believe this is the way to travel. Now, we shouldn't be under any illusions. There are also people heavily invested, some of the big multi-academy trust chains, some current ministers in the education department, who are invested in this model that is becoming more and more outdated, because they see that as the way. A lot of people, I think, have the security of knowing where they stand with just churning people through SATs and GCSEs and A-levels, and I think are a bit nervous of moving away from that. And that's why the onus is on us to find solutions that a broad spectrum of people can buy into, so that people have more confidence at saying, well, we can move from the current system to something that really will work better. Because all of us know that our first duty is to the students in front of us, and we don't want to jeopardize them by throwing everything up in the air without having put the building blocks in place of what the new system is. So we've got to work, you know, and that's why us being practitioners, we may have big dreams about this, but also completely rooted in the day-to-day reality of serving the young people in front of us.
I think this is something I'm always interested in, and this is something I referred to at the beginning, is that I love to work with people that have their feet in both camps, who are theoretical but also know what it's like pragmatically and how it can be worked. These great dreams and visions can be worked into the real lived experience for the teachers and the children. Just picking up on the word curriculum, I'm with you. This idea that Ofsted have really put out a challenge for schools to think about their curriculum design. It is the most important gift that we give our children. It's a gift we give them to take into the future, and it's a future where we will never see them fully open that gift, and we've got to hope it will serve them well. So as a head teacher, I have to think very carefully. And over the, if I may share then, over the lockdown, although as teachers we weren't really closed in, we were in school, but it certainly gave us some time to think about how it impacted on our lived experience. And I noticed that people picked up the guitar, they got down the violin and dusted it off from the attic. They started to connect with their university mates and perhaps set up quizzes. They FaceTimed with their family. They started to learn samba and salsa and sourdough. We started to recycle more. We started to pick up medicines for our neighbors. We started to be much more thoughtful about our recycling. We went around on our bicycles and we didn't get into our cars, and we certainly took some time to smell the roses. And so in looking at those experiences, the model that I see came out of that were these words that for us at Milton Road are our curriculum words, are identity, connection, adventure, which is learning, citizenship, and planet. This sense of looking beyond the present and the exam system, which is a one-time only output. It's about this longer sustainable understanding of education, and those are the words that actually link to Valerie Hannon's wonderful Thrive model of a curriculum that develops the personal, the interpersonal, the societal, and the global. And going back to this word purpose, and Floras got us thinking about this word purpose, a purposeful education and a purposeful curriculum that prepares young people to be the best that they can be in society, to make the world as good as it can be for themselves and for others. So Flora, in thinking about curriculum design, and as Peter has said, that these are intrinsically linked, assessment and curriculum are hand in hand, two sides of the same coin. Have you, over the last few years, refreshed your curriculum design and this word purpose within what you've been thinking about?
Yeah, we've actually been working on the curriculum for about the last 2 years, and just, again, rethinking what we want to teach our children and rethinking sort of how we can make learning more engaging for our children, but really focusing as well on what we have around us. So, for instance, we have the river down the road from us, and I asked the question, how many visits have you made to the river this year? And it's shocking, you know, when we were thinking about this, it was shocking because we hadn't made any visits to the river. And it's simple things like that, because you get so caught up in the day-to-day things that you forget to look around you, you forget to refresh your perspective. And I think for us, that is what the curriculum redesign is about, is re-looking at it, stepping back and thinking, okay, let's look at this again, let's clear the pages, and let's think, what is it that we want our children to learn, and what do we have around us that we can utilize? So I think curriculum design for every school should be about thinking about where you live, the context, the children you have, and what types of experiences you want to give your children. Because as I keep saying, school is about creating memories for children. And it's very much about the experience we give them of learning within
I think
school.
that's such a lovely idea. School is about creating those memories. And I know as adults, we hold on to those stories of good and bad of our own experience of being within the school. And it either helps shape how we want things to be better, or there are going to be things that we thought worked really well, we're going to continue. And that sort of ontology as a student ourselves somewhat influences the way we might design the curriculum for the children in front of us. Adrian, have you been thinking about curriculum and assessment? Has that started to be a thread within your school improvement that you've been working on?
Yeah, I mean, but not in kind of traditional kind of ways. So curriculum, predominantly my work since lockdown actually has been focused more on designing a wellbeing curriculum. So since last summer, I've been working with Oxford University Press for their international team, creating a wellbeing curriculum that is going to be going from reception up to year 9 for their international students, and looking at the science of wellbeing and how you can teach the knowledge and skills to young people to get them to think about themselves, to get them, as Peter said, to help them understand themselves, their identity, their place in the world. But then crucially, part of the wellbeing curriculum is to get them to practice the skills of wellbeing, because a wellbeing expert that I love, Professor Laurie Santos, who's at Yale University, says that knowing what makes you happy has no impact on your happiness whatsoever. It's about our actions, it's about our habits and our behaviors. So I've been kind of working on that with Oxford University Press. In my own school, we've been looking at what we can put on the curriculum in terms of developing the wellbeing skills of our students. So I teach a mindfulness curriculum at my school. We're also invested in a new PSHE curriculum, which is kind of more holistic than our previous one. But in terms of assessment, in terms of well-being, when I think of assessment and well-being, I don't think of like tests and that. It's more, we've been looking at well-being measurement. So I've been working with or speaking with the What Works Centre for Wellbeing in the UK. We've been running since last year kind of staff wellbeing surveys, pupil wellbeing surveys, because there are some really good, validated, robust measures of well-being, and the intention behind measuring well-being is to see, one, to have a baseline, see how our students and our teachers are doing, and see if there are any themes and trends in any particular students that may need more help and support. The other thing is to then, once you're putting well-being on your curriculum, once you're creating this culture, as Floras said, of well-being, is what you're doing having the impact you want it to have? Like, in theory, you should see a change over time, gradually, of people's well-being increasing if you're doing the right things, or if well-being is high, kind of maintaining that. And this is important, and compared to other types of data collection in school, where a lot of it, from my experience, is meaningless. It's collecting data for data's sake. This I find like a really meaningful exercise, and the data you get from it is really kind of interesting, and it's meaningful in it, and it shows you where your strengths are and shows schools where you might need to invest more resources, time, whatever. And it's like Professor Richard Layard says, you treasure what you measure. And I think for too often in schools, we've been just measuring grades and academic progress, and we literally bow down at the altar of, league tables and stuff. Not obviously everyone, but, systemically we have. And I want to see this shift towards measuring well-being, but not not so that we compete, like Floras is saying, that we celebrate the things that we're doing well, and we work out the things that we need to improve.
We treasure what we measure, and I love that. I love that saying. And I know that the work of Andreas Schleicher and the OECD, their 2030 learning framework, is directing towards well-being as an outcome, and 17 indicators of well-being, including being able to have a house, access to culture, being able to be fit and well. And I think these would form the basis for a good way of assessing how well. In fact, they use these measures on entire cities. So we have this sort of idea of the output of what we want for our citizens, but we're not necessarily creating an education system that supports leading towards these well-being measures that are looked at so thoroughly by the Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development. I think we really do need to be going downstream on this, and our curriculum design should be looking at the 2030 vision for where our young people are going to be when they're entering university or entering the job market. What are they going to do? How are they going to feel about themselves? And what are they going to be able to offer to society? So Flora, you're a very thoughtful, very engaged leader. What do you do? Where are your thoughts for your own professional development? Where are your next steps about what you are looking to do and to achieve within the education ecosystem with your conference? Or what are the things that are on your mind that you want to either continue doing or do next?
I think for me, the Burn Brighter event is really just about moving education forwards, rethinking where we want to go, where we want to be. And again, that word purpose, the purpose of everything that we're doing. So for me, that's a priority at the moment, is moving that forwards, and seeing change happen. Getting the right people listening, I think, is crucial. So you talk about my professional development. I tweeted out the other day actually about someone asking, when are you going to leave? You've been here 8 years, in a nice way. And it just made me think they've become my family, and the thought of leaving headship, I love my job. I absolutely love what I do. And the thought of leaving and going somewhere and starting it all again seems crazy. But obviously I do have plans. But actually one of the things I have been seriously considering is running for MP. And that could be something on the cards, perhaps.
Wonderful. Well, we know that there are a number of teachers that are doing really well as MPs. So it's something that I'm sure there'll be lots of great people you could talk to get thoughts from. So Peter, can you tell me a little bit more about Big Education and the wonderful work you're doing with Lizzie Robinson, and the work that you're doing on leadership, because that looks really very inspiring.
Yeah, we set up something called the Big Leadership Adventure, which is a leadership program that we think is very different from any others. So it is trying to support more leaders to become more expansive leaders. So there's a sort of logic chain to everything that we do. We've got a leadership wheel for this program that's based around, as you probably guessed, head, heart, and hand, because we think that applies as much to leaders as it does to young people. And it's saying within head, how do you become a leader that is genuinely horizon scanning, has really thought deeply about the purpose of education, and therefore be that bigger strategic thinker. Under heart, how do we develop well-being, both amongst staff, amongst pupils, but how do we build really successful teams? And how do we think about how that works? And then in terms of hand, how do we get things done? How do we design great practices? I'm getting, in terms of my personal development, getting far more to design thinking, because I think it offers real insights, and it's not really been brought into education as it has into many other sectors. And for those who know the sort of double diamond way of thinking, it's this idea that you start by really getting underneath the problem. Then, and this, for example, for assessment, rethinking assessment is exactly the right way of doing it, which is to say, look, let's hone the problem, let's horizon scan, which is a bit of the double diamond. Let's look around the world, let's be really thoughtful about where we can draw on the best ideas. Then, like the closing of the diamond, let's start to select things that we can pilot and prototype. The other big thing in education is we very rarely pilot things. And I know as a head teacher, most of my initiatives are for the whole school. We never say we're going to trial it with that one class and trial something different with another class and then get the findings. We're a very impatient system, and impatient in schools just to have quick fixes to things. But actually, if we use that methodology, we then begin to think, well, we've got better thoughts here, better ideas of how we solve problems in a really in-depth way. And any of the things we've discussed today lend themselves to that design thinking process. Let's take well-being. You could have different teachers in different classes trialing different aspects of well-being curriculum to see which the young people react best to, then starting to roll it out to the rest of the school once we've got more of an evidence base about what's working. So I'm really into design thinking because I think it provides insights into leadership, into how you run a more empowering school, and I think it also, builds a real sense of culture and team in its processes.
Yeah, wonderful. I'll just share with you the things I'm thinking about based on. Certainly, we were using design thinking, the IDEO model for the process that we're going on at Milton Road around curriculum, and I'm really interested in education neuroscience. We've got a really great education neuroscience centre here based at Cambridge University. And I think the more that children learn about how the brain works and links that to mindfulness is very powerful, but also teachers themselves understanding growth mindset, not in the sort of Baudelarized way where as an NLE, I once went into a school and I was told, we're doing growth mindset this afternoon. It was a discrete lesson. I just thought, this is just not going to work. But teachers understanding that they themselves are learners. And in that vein, the area for my professional next steps is I'm joining Professor Rachel Lofthouse's next cohort to learn a little bit more about coaching, so that I can use that within the school improvement journey that we're going on, because this is my second headship. I started last January, just before the pandemic. So that's where I'm going next. Adrian, you're the person who hasn't had a chance to say what your professional next steps are and the things that you're interested in.
So next steps, what was really interesting for me during lockdown, and I'm sure it has been for many people, was that I was booked to do a lot of talks and training, and suddenly that all got cancelled for obvious reasons. But many organisers put events online, and so during lockdown, I spoke for half a day at the Gateshead Wellbeing in Schools conference. I delivered inset training to school in Plymouth, all from this office in my back garden in Tring. And, you know, one thing I had the time to do kind of over the summer holidays was put some of my training online, which then means, you know, rather than me physically having to travel around the country to schools, and then I'm just there live and then I'm gone, put this training online, recorded it. So schools, it's a lot cheaper. It's kind of on demand. One thing that I know teachers really enjoyed about accessing CPD online was that they could do it from the comfort of their sofa, rather than all having to be crammed into the school hall or a classroom on a Wednesday 4 till 5, when they'd really just like to go and pick their kids up. And, you know, having that flexibility with CPD really interests me. So yeah, what I'm doing at the moment, I've put a course that I have written a few years ago called The Seeds of Happiness. I put the training online because I was all booked to deliver the training at London South Bank Uni literally on the 20th of March, and I had to cancel it because, you know, we were imminently going into lockdown. So that course is now online. It's cheaper online than when I was doing it in person. And now what I'm doing is starting to record material to put on a website so staff can access the training that I normally deliver in schools from my book, just online, on demand. So I'm really excited about that, because it just means that the reach is bigger. And that's always been my intention, is to get the research around the science of wellbeing and how you can put it into practice in a typical busy primary school, just get it into as many schools as possible.
And with that, Adrian, you've managed to answer one of the questions we've had today from our fabulous friend, Ros Wilson. And she's asking, how do I get Adrian to come and share his ideas with the other teachers in her Hackney Primary School? I love what Adrian is talking about, many similarities about my own journey in education. How can I get you into school? So I'm imagining you've just given the answer, and that will be on your website. There she is. There's our lovely Ros. Ros is also a teacher in an Ashoka Changemaker schools, and
cool.
21 is also an Ashoka Changemaker school, and Milton Road is also an Ashoka Changemaker school. Schools that are thinking differently about the curriculum and this sense of sustainability and the purpose of education to create these great citizens for the future. So we're just coming now to the point where I want to hand back to Ellen, who we met at the top of the show. Ellen Jones is the editor for the Smiley movement and is a great young activist herself. And Ellen, it's back to you for any questions that we've had.
Thank you so much. It's been a really, really insightful panel. I feel like we've covered the length and breadth of the whole education system, essentially. We've got a few questions. The first is, we've talked a lot about the well-being of teachers and, involving students in their education, but how do parents fit into the picture, and how do we engage parents, particularly at a time when, students have done a lot of learning from home?
That's a good question.
Who wants to take that?
Adrian, do you want Oh, there you go, Peter.
Well, I was just going to say, and another thing we've done during this period is we've created a website and series of Bloggable Learning, lockdown.com, and we've had some incredible contributions to that. Some have been talking about exactly this, which is there's been just fresh insights about two or three things: the conditions that some young people have got at home and how we can support them. Obviously, there's this big issue at the moment about free school meals, but also the digital divide and who's had devices at home. But also there's been reconnections with parents at this time, and a growing sense in schools about understanding what parents are going through and what also might help them and their families. So a lot of schools are thinking about things I don't think in a way it's so obvious we should have done them in the past. Like if a parent is working and can't turn up for a parents' evening, it's now so obvious we'd do a Zoom call with them. But I think before the pandemic, none of us really had that at the top of our agenda. So I think there's lots of small and bigger ways in which people are really connecting with parents and don't want to lose that connection now that lockdown has stopped and children have come back. So I think we're being very thoughtful about what can come next and how we support families. Well, one very quick addition to that, there are some students for whom lockdown, it suited them in terms of, not suited them as in socially did, but in terms of their learning. There were some students with special needs who found that the way it was working of having a parent supporting at home and then a teacher online gave them more personal attention. And there were also some young people who always used to play up in class, who then, because they were again working from home in a different way, got through 2 or 3 times the amount of work. So again, schools are being very thoughtful about what the implications of that are now that they're back in the classroom.
One of the things I think one of the words of 2020 is pivot. And Adrian, you had to pivot all of your approach to training. But a quick pivot that we did was to use Seesaw, which is an online learning platform. And our next steps are to use the elements within the app so that in fact, going back to your point, Peter, about a teacher trialing. So one teacher has started to trial taking photographs of the children's work and sending it, uploading it to parents, getting immediate feedback, doing some flipped learning to help children who might have been struggling with a piece of maths or had the potential to struggle with a piece of maths, and inviting parents to go over some of the concepts ahead of the lesson on a Monday. And we're just starting to see this connection. And honestly, I don't think we would have accelerated our use of technology if it hadn't have been for this pernicious, evil pandemic. Laura, have you got any ways of engaging parents?
No, I think what Peter was saying about how Zoom and everything has completely transformed everything, and I think opened up a whole new avenue of reaching out to parents. And I think parents are always, it's something we really need to focus on in schools and make sure that we are teaching parents about well-being just as much as we are with the children and the staff, so that they understand obviously what we're trying to do in schools, but also so they can support what we are doing in school and we can support them at home. I think that's a crucial next step for a lot of schools.
I was just going to add to that, Flora. I completely agree. What we've done in the last 3 schools I've worked in is host workshops for parents on the curriculum of well-being that we're teaching in schools, to not only let them know, what mindfulness is, because there's a lot of myths around that, how you can apply at home, how you can support your children, signpost parents to maybe this is something you'd like to explore for yourself. But crucially, there's a quote I love from developmental psychologist Alison Gopnik, who says that children learn far more from their caregivers' unconscious behaviors than any of their conscious manipulations. So like any teaching of well-being, it lands best and strongest when it is modeled by the significant caregivers, be that teachers or parents. So it's crucial that teachers model good well-being. It's crucial that parents do, and that will have the biggest impact on children.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for that. We've got time for one last question, which is what's one thing that people can do that's actionable to support your vision for education, if each of you would like to answer that? Maybe starting with Ray.
So my current vision for education is to #network the networks, because what I see is that there are so many great movements happening. There are so many fantastic grassroots-led social action taking place, but we don't see each other. And if anybody follows me on Twitter, one of the things that I put is hashtag only connect. And so Flora's doing wonderful work, Peter's doing great work, Adrian's doing great work, but we don't know that we might have reached a 16% tipping point. And we don't know because we work in these, I hate this word, but I'm going to say it anyway, silos. So one of the reasons why I'm excited about working with Smiley as one of as your first education ambassador. Her ambassador is if there is a way of creating a repository, that sounds very scientific and a little bit ugly, but a repository or just having a place that if I wanted to know more about Flora, I could go to the Smiley movement. This is a really positive movement. It's about sharing positivity, looking for change. It's non-affiliative. It's a charitable organization. If I wanted to know more about Peter or Adrian or Women Ed or whoever, we could start to network the network so that we can just start to see each other. So to support me, I would just say I want to do more talks like this. If you want to be part of the next Smiley Education Talks, direct message me at Ray Snape.
Thank you very much. Next, Adrian, do you want to
go? I would say, as let's think about parents. Like if you're a parent and you've watched this, or you believe, like many of us have been saying, that education should be about the whole child. Like, and if you feel that your school is doing that well, then let your school know that you appreciate what they're doing. And secondly, if you think that your child's school could be heading in a different direction, just let your school know that, not in an aggressive way, but just let them know that is what you want for your children. Because I think sometimes schools that aren't doing this kind of holistic child model education, they're doing it because they think this is what parents want. Our parents want their kids to get the best grades. And actually, when you ask most parents, they want a more holistic approach to education. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And also, I guess, making it clear to your young people that you're open to listening to their opinions as well, and that you're open to suggestions. And I know certainly a lot of where my activism started was thankfully having a school that was receptive to at least hearing my ideas, and then I began to implement them. But if that hadn't have been the case, who knows what would have happened? Peter, do you want to tell me what something actionable people can do?
Yeah, I would turn to oracy and people's. We need to listen to people more. So it's speaking, but it's also listening. So we need to listen to more diverse voices. We need to parents more. We need to listen to Black voices more. We need to listen to a huge diversity of voices within education. It's become too narrow who is heard and who is listened to. And I think we also need to build up, as I've said, the identity of both teachers and young people, so that we get that greater plurality of voices.
Yeah, for sure. That sounds very, very good. And Flora, finally, coming to you.
So I think what everybody has said. So Ray said networking. I think absolutely we need to do that. Collaboration, as Adrian said, collaborate with parents. Make sure that we are involving as many people. So as Peter said, more voices, more power. We need to get everyone's voices involved and make sure that we are heard. And if you want to join the Burn Brighter movement, we have another event coming up in December. And again, more voices, more power, and hopefully we get heard.
That sounds really great. And just to say, most of our speakers, if not all of you, are on Twitter, and you seem to be quite active there. So if anyone listening has really enjoyed this and would like to find out more, you can head to the Twitter pages of our speakers. Thank you so much for everyone today, and especially Flora, Adrian, and Peter for being such great panelists, and especially Ray for, of course, being a fantastic host. Thank you so much to everyone for tuning into the Big Education Action Plan event. Make sure you head to smileymovement.org to find out more about our speakers and the causes they fight for. And you can also find out more about our future events on our talks page. We'd love to hear what you think.
Bye.